Why does almost every human on Earth trace back to one single place? It's not a coincidence, and it's not quite as simple as your textbook made it sound. Either hear me out. Here's what you'll actually walk away with. Not just where humans started, but why that migration instinct never left you and why you still feel it every time you get restless in one place too long. The Out of Africa story gets repeated so often, it starts to sound like settled trivia. Humans began in Africa, then spread everywhere else. True, but the real evidence behind it is far more interesting than the one-line version. And for decades, it wasn't even the leading theory. Before the 1980s, many scientists actually favored a competing idea called multi-regionalism, the theory that
What?
different human populations evolved somewhat independently in different regions, from earlier hominin populations already scattered across the globe. It wasn't a fringe idea, it was mainstream science. Then, in 1987, a geneticist named Alan Wilson and a researcher named Rebecca Can published a study that reshaped the entire field. They analyzed mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed down almost exclusively through mothers from people across many different populations worldwide. Mitochondrial DNA mutates at a fairly predictable rate, which means scientists can use it like a molecular clock, counting backward through generations. Their results pointed to something startling. Every mitochondrial lineage they studied traced back to a single common ancestral population in Africa, dating to roughly 200,000 years ago. The press nicknamed her Mitochondrial Eve, though she wasn't one single woman in the way that name implies. She represents the most recent common maternal ancestor whose mitochondrial line survived in every person alive today. This didn't just support the out of Africa idea, it gave it a testable genetic backbone that fossils alone couldn't provide. A paleoanthropologist named Chris Stringer became one of the strongest voices connecting the genetic evidence to the physical fossil record. His research helped establish what's now called the recent African origin model, the idea that modern Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and then expanded outward in waves, gradually replacing or absorbing other hominin populations they encountered along the way, rather than evolving in parallel across multiple continents. Here's where it gets even more interesting and more recent. A geneticist named Svante Pabo led the team that successfully sequenced the Neanderthal genome, a feat that won him the Nobel Prize. His research revealed something the simple out of Africa full replacement story hadn't accounted for. Most people with non-African ancestry carry somewhere between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Human migration out of Africa wasn't a clean sweep. It involved actual interbreeding with other hominin populations already living in Eurasia. So the real picture isn't humans emerging in Africa and marching outward into empty land. It's humans emerging in Africa, moving outward in multiple waves over tens of thousands of years, and mixing with other human relatives already scattered across the world, before eventually becoming the only human lineage left standing. That migration wasn't a single event either. It happened repeatedly, in pulses, likely driven by climate shifts, changing coastlines, and resource pressure, pushing small groups outward generation after generation until humans had reached nearly every habitable landmass on Earth, on foot, without maps, without knowing what was on the other side of the next ridge or coastline. This is the part worth sitting with. That drive didn't disappear when the migrating stopped making biological sense. You are descended, without exception, from people who chose to keep walking into the unknown rather than staying where things were familiar and survivable. Every single ancestor in your line, going back tens of thousands of years, took that same bet at some point and it worked out. That's why restlessness in one place for too long isn't just modern boredom or wanderlust marketing copy. It's an old, well-tested instinct. sitting quietly in a body built by people who never stopped moving toward whatever was over the next horizon. You don't need to interpret that as a command to travel constantly. But the next time staying in one place too long starts to feel wrong for no clear reason, know that feeling has a 50,000-year track record behind it, and it was right often enough that you exist to feel it. Why does almost every human on Earth trace back to one single place? No, we know why. Because the ones who left again and again, generation after generation, were the ones who survived to become your ancestors. You're not just descended from people who lived, you're descended from people who moved.